If you could give me like 3 or 4 minutes to summarize, and if from questioning,
sure, please do. Aaron, even for Aaron, went on a little bit longer than I thought. But yeah, please.
That's fine. First and foremost, see, I would argue there's two main intellectual pillars underlying the Islamic tradition. One is the existence of a designer creator for the universe. And the second is the inimitability of the Quranic discourse, which basically means that the Quran is a text that lies outside the productive capacity of the Arabic language. And we could discuss what that means in a minute. Let's start with the first intellectual pillar. The first intellectual pillar, there's many arguments. You've probably heard them before. I've seen what you had to say. It's all very interesting. However, let me go straight, for example, to the teleological argument, a refined version of the teleological argument that doesn't really require a discussion on evolution. It more requires a discussion on physics. For example, it's almost well known now that there are certain values and constants in the universe, especially when we look at the initial conditions of the Big Bang. Now, we could discuss what they are, but just listen to the inference that we're making here. Now, there's few possible explanations for this fine-tuning. Take the expansion rate of the universe as an example. If it differed from 1 quintillionth of a second, then we wouldn't have the universe today. Take the ratio of electromagnetic force to the force of gravity, for instance. So we have a whole set of physical constants and values. Now, the argument is, the fine-tuning of the universe, the apparent fine-tuning of the universe, could be either due to physical necessity, chance, or design. I would argue it can't be physical necessity or chance, therefore it's design. It's not an analogy, it's actually an inference to the best explanation. So we're reasoning to the best explanation. The reason I'm saying it can't be physical necessity because these laws and these values and constants are not contingent on the laws of nature. Also, it would have us to believe that a universe not fit for life could never exist. Also, the chance argument I don't think is a plausible argument. It doesn't have much rational force because the chances are so improbable that to use as a rational explanation is actually not an explanation. For instance, from a practical perspective, if you want to look at it from a crude perspective, we could basically start claiming anything. For instance,
can I jump in for just a moment?
Yep.
I have to tell you that everybody in this audience has heard the fine-tuning argument pretty much to death.
Sure.
And while the cosmological chaos that you refer to as fine-tuning is an assumption I can't side with you on, so the premise is already a problem. You want to talk about if there was a slight degree? No. We have far exceeded the slight degrees. On every fine-tuning argument I've ever heard, I've been given the limits of how far things would have to be in order for everything to collapse. And we already regularly, casually exceed those limits by orders of magnitude.
Can I also raise another point, which I didn't want to, but if I may. I think what follows on from Aaron's point is this. We have heard this argument before, and we have heard it from Christians. And we've heard it from different denominations of Christians, and we're now hearing it from you. Why should the fine-tuning argument imply that your God exists and not the Christian God of any particular denomination?
I don't even go that far, DPR. I don't care about identifying which God it is. First of all, we have to establish that there is fine-tuning, and thus far, being as we can only exist on 4% of the shell of one world out of godzillions, and that we can't survive anywhere else or anywhen else because there's only a tiny window of time in which we can exist on this planet, then clearly this universe was not designed for life.
Well, actually,
and I can't accept this premise to follow it to conclusion.
Yeah, but sorry, Aaron, you did say that you don't like philosophy, and it actually shows in your logic there. I do apologize. I mean, just because we can't live on Pluto, or just because the human race may have only a certain amount of time amongst this infinite amount of time that the universe is going to be in existence due to heat death or whatever the case may be, it doesn't follow that the universe to permit life is not fine-tuned. I don't see how it follows logically. I think that's an outdated cliche. Look, hold on, for instance, the strong nuclear force, right? Okay, the value is 0.007. Sorry, go on.
I got to clarify something.
Yeah,
on
sure.
the fine-tuning thing. I mean, when something is evidently true and never refuted, we call that a timeless truth, not an outdated cliche. I just want to clarify that first off. And sure. Just because we can't live anywhere else but the shell of this planet, only in the brief period that this planet can support our type of environment, also implies that it is not fine-tuned. However, since we are an adaptive species,
it doesn't imply fine-tuning.
As all life forms are, life forms will conform to their environment just like a puddle conforms to the hole that it's in. A puddle, I'm sure you've heard this argument, can say, well, this hole must have been perfectly designed for me. It's so finely tuned. We adapted to the environment, and we can only adapt so far to so much of it, and that's it. So obviously, the universe cannot be fine-tuned. I can't follow your conclusion if I can't accept your premise.
Okay, there's a few things here, Aaron. First and foremost, we're talking about the initial conditions of the universe and essentially the values and constants from a physics perspective. Evolution or species doesn't really have a foot in the door. And one of the arguments you made about the pool, for instance...
Can you clarify that?
Yeah.
What do you mean it doesn't have a foot in the door?
Because there's one argument about the evolution of species on this particular planet. The argument we're posing is that due to the physical constants, that couldn't even happen in the first place. Do you see? So there's something...
How do you explain it then?
Well, that's a different story. Yeah, that's a different story. But I just want you really to understand the argument I'm trying to pose here. Now, the argument you're saying about when you see a species and we're adapted to our environment, so we're in a pool, we're supposed to be here, is almost like the anthropic principle, which basically says we shouldn't be surprised we're here because we're here. Now, that's a valid principle, and I do appreciate that. But however, take the following analogy. Say I had 100 marksmen who were trained since they were age of 5. And they all had lasers on their guns, and they point to my head, and you hear the bang, shoot, and they all miss. Now, I shouldn't be surprised I'm alive because I'm alive. However, it doesn't infer that I shouldn't be surprised because of the improbability of them missing. And this is what we're talking about. Now, you may say that there isn't fine-tuning based upon what you just spoke about, but let's take, for instance, the strong nuclear force. The value is 0.007. If it was 0.006...
In what units?
Sorry?
What units?
I don't have the units. This is a quote from...
You've just got a figure and you don't know what units it is.
No, I don't.
Right. Can you also explain this for me, please?
Sure.
How does gravity affect life? Can life exist without gravity, for example?
Yeah, I assume so.
Right. So it's not highly... Your argument's just crumbled, hasn't it?
How has it?
Because the gravitational constant is not necessary for life, and you don't even know what units you're referring to. So I'm sorry. The argument really does sound very implausible.
DPR, may I interject something? Okay, when you're talking about if gravity were different, okay, for example, on Earth, the gravity is 9.81 meters per second squared. On the Moon, it's 1.62 meters per second squared. Venus, it's 8.8. Mars, it's 3.7. But on all of these bodies, gravity still works. So if the gravitational constant were changed, all of these values would have been changed accordingly. But there's no reason to believe that the train just runs completely off the track. There's no way we could know that that would happen. If things were different, they would be different. But that doesn't mean that we wouldn't have a valid physical universe.
Yeah, and I probably should bring up something else since you're mentioning gravity.
Sorry. You may have a valid physical universe, but would you have a universe that could permit life? Because the range of values are very small here. And the thing is...
I'm sorry, before you proceed with this argument, you're talking about things which you clearly do not understand. You're talking about a number, and you can't even put the unit on what the force of what this force is. How do you expect to be taken credibly?
Okay, see, I don't claim... Okay, I'll give you an example. Could you answer, for example, how a statistician would actually calculate the probabilities of the fine-tuning? I couldn't do that. I don't claim to do that. I'm actually standing on the shoulders of a giant.
I've seen people do that, yes.
Yeah, I know. So have I.
But it's not a difficult thing to fudge.
It doesn't claim... So what I'm trying to say is, I'm not claiming that I'm a physicist. Nowhere near. All I'm saying is this. If premise number one is true, if there is fine-tuning, for example, we read the works...
And we've already established that premise number one is not true.
Well, I would argue if you read a basic college physics textbook, you could even find a page with some of these constants on there. I was just trying to do that.
Unfortunately, you have not, because you don't even know what units you're referring to.
Hold on, DPR, hold on a moment. You got to remember.
I think what you're doing, DPR, is...
I've read the thing. I've read the thing where I've read the thing about, if the orbit of the Earth were just, where the Earth was just 10 feet or 10 meters more that way than this way, then we would overheat and everything. And then I've seen the figures for how far the planet actually does ellipse, and it's way beyond all of these fine-tuning arguments. And all of these conditions apply. Every time that somebody brings up a fine-tuning argument, it turns out that the tuning is way off from what they thought it was. The premise does not stand. There is no evident fine-tuning in this universe. And where you're going with that after that, you said something in Dublin that I found really interesting. You said if we exhaust the naturalistic explanations, that it would open a door to the transcendent. No, it doesn't. If you don't know the answer, it means you don't know the answer. It doesn't mean you do know the answer and it's something we didn't believe. No, it means you don't know the answer.
No, I think you misunderstood what I said.
I want you to think about something in history. Okay, you talk about reality, and that's good. But you have to remember where science has come from and where it's gone. There was a time when we did not understand the causes of disease, for example, and we blamed those on curses or demons. I mean, the head of the Protestant church, it criticized doctors as being fools because they treated diseases as if they came from natural maladies.
Yes.
And lightning was given a similar supernatural explanation. Volcanoes are described in Exodus as if they were gods. And there's so many different fields. Epilepsy was considered to be demonic possession, and comets were supposed to be an omen, and the planets themselves were supposed to have personalities and be beings. And they could even come down to the earth and fight people, according to the Bible. The thing is that in every one of those instances, had we been satisfied with the supernatural answer, we would never have progressed. But when we lost satisfaction with the supernatural excuses and went out to find out what the real answer was, in each one of the examples I just gave you, alchemy to chemistry, for example, we found a whole new field of knowledge revealed, which would have remained concealed forever had we set with the supernatural explanation.
That's not true. That's not true. It's the Muslims that, don't forget see, look, what we have to understand is this, see, we shouldn't superimpose a particular historical narrative and think it applies to every single religion. I agree that in Europe specifically... Let
me clarify then, because remember, I'm going to want data. I'm going to want facts. I don't care about opinions.
Yep.
So in each of the examples I gave you just now, the supernatural answer turned out to be wrong, right? Sure. Okay. I would posit that the supernatural answer is always wrong, and it's not just that it's wrong because it's not the way things really happen. It's wrong just to suggest a supernatural explanation because it has always only ever acted as an intellectual impediment to all progress, effectively stopping all advance. True. Okay, then can you name me in the history of science when the supernatural explanation ever actually improved our understanding of anything?
Okay, take Islamic civilization as an example when Europe was in the Dark Ages. And if you read, for example, most history books on science, you would see that a lot of the things with regards to chemistry, alchemy, etc., were all, you can see the chains of knowledge ending up on Islamic scholarship. The reason I would argue this, and even the non-Muslim historians say, is because the Quran didn't pose arguments for physical reality. It told the human being, for example, go out into the universe and the heavens and the earth and explore and learn. For instance, the Quran says, يَتَفَكَّرُونَ, for those who reflect and think and ponder and investigate. So there was a totally different narrative here. Now,
okay, then let me clarify again.
Yeah.
Can you show me one time in the history of science when a supernatural explanation ever turned out to be right, meaning that it ever actually improved our understanding of anything?
Okay, so you're conflating two things here, Aaron, yeah? The conflation is you're conflating science with explanation. And here there's an underlying supposition.
That is what it is.
Yeah, well, it isn't. This is why...
No, that is what it is.
Okay, let me explain something very simply for you, yeah? See, scientism, which is about epistemology, essentially...
No, we're not talking about scientism. We're talking about science.
Yeah, well, okay. Let me just break it down for you. Science is not the only way to form conclusions about things, okay?
It is for me.
Okay. Well,
What other ways are there?
okay. Well, the thing. Let me just address what Aaron said. Well, that in itself is an assumption that's not very well grounded.
It's
Aaron.
not an assumption.
Right?
It's
What
tested.
other, you say it's an assumption, it's not well grounded. What other
No.
ways are there?
Aaron, the statement you made is not tested. It's the testing is as a result of adopting the assumption. You have to understand that, Aaron. Yeah. It's not-
Okay, clarify what I have to understand. What, sir?
What I'm saying is the statement you made that science is the only way to form conclusions about life. You're saying that is tested. That's actually not tested. That is a philosophical premise. It's an
No,
assumption.
that's tested.
Okay. Well, I would argue that science is not the only way to form conclusions about life. It's useful as a methodology.
I know,
I agree.
you've explained that, and I asked you what other methods you are suggesting.
Okay, I'm going to explain that when the sound gets back on.